Credits and copyright disclaimer. This narration script is a transformative adaptation based on the novel The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft. All rights to the original characters, plotline, and source material belong to the original author and publishers. This script is created for narration, educational review, and entertainment purposes. In the dimly lit, smoke-filled chambers of the mind, where the flickering candles of reason cast eerie shadows on the walls, there exists a realm of unutterable horrors, a domain of madness and terror that defies the rational comprehension of mortal men. It is a realm where the fabric of reality is torn asunder, where the very foundations of sanity are shaken, and the abyssal void yawns open, revealing glimpses of unfathomable, eldritch abominations that lurk beyond the veil of the mundane world. It was in this foreboding atmosphere of creeping dread and existential despair that I first stumbled upon the mysterious manuscript, a tattered, yellowed document penned in a language that seemed to shift and writhe like a living serpent on the page. The words themselves appeared to be a maddening amalgam of ancient, forgotten tongues, a cryptic, symbolic script that whispered dark secrets to the initiated, while remaining impenetrable to the uninitiated. As I delicately turned the pages, a faint, musty scent wafted up, like the stench of decay and corruption, transporting me to realms both forgotten and forlorn. The manuscript, it seemed, was the work of a brilliant, yet troubled scholar, a man named Francis Wayland Thurston, who had devoted his life to unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos, only to become increasingly entangled in a web of dark, foreboding mythology. His writings spoke of an ancient, malevolent deity, a monstrous, octopus-like creature known as Cthulhu, said to reside in a state of hibernation, waiting for the stars to align in a specific, celestial configuration, at which point it would awaken, unleashing a maelstrom of unholy terror upon the world. As I delved deeper into the manuscript, I began to experience a growing sense of unease, a feeling that I was being drawn into a realm of unutterable, soul-shattering horror, a realm where the rational, daylight world was but a distant, fading memory. The words on the page seemed to sear themselves into my brain, like a branding iron, leaving an indelible mark that would haunt me for the rest of my days. I became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the Cult of Cthulhu, a mysterious, worldwide organization, rumored to be dedicated to the worship and awakening of this eldritch, otherworldly creature. My investigation led me to the dusty, cobweb-filled recesses of ancient libraries, where crumbling, leather-bound tomes whispered secrets of a bygone era, an era of dark, mystic rituals and forbidden knowledge. I pored over the works of alchemists, occultists, and mystics, seeking any mention of the Cthulhu cult, or the monstrous, green, scaly creature that was said to be its focal point. The more I read, the more I became convinced that I was onto something, that I had stumbled upon a thread that, when pulled, would unravel a vast, intricate tapestry of horror and deceit. The air grew thick with an almost palpable sense of foreboding, as I uncovered hints of a global conspiracy, a hidden network of robed, hooded figures who moved undetected like ghosts in the shadows of our modern, rational world. They were the servants of Cthulhu, the chosen ones, who had dedicated their lives to the pursuit of an unspeakable, eldritch goal, a goal that would bring about a catastrophic, apocalyptic reckoning, one that would shatter the fragile, crystalline structures of our reality, plunging humanity into an abyss of unending, nightmarish terror. As the shadows deepened and the wind outside began to howl, like a chorus of restless, damned souls, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unblinking, malevolent eyes were trained upon me, waiting for me to make my next move. The manuscript, it seemed, had become a catalyst, a key that had unlocked a doorway to a realm of unutterable, soul-shattering horror, a realm that I had unwittingly entered, and from which I might never escape. And yet I was drawn deeper, like a moth to the flame, helpless to resist the morbid, fascinating allure of the Cthulhu mythos, a dark, siren's call that beckoned me ever closer to the brink of madness and beyond. In the flickering candlelight, the words on the page seemed to shift and rearrange themselves like a twisted cryptographic code, whispering secrets of a terrible apocalyptic future, a future in which the stars would align and Cthulhu would rise, unleashing a tidal wave of unutterable eldritch horror upon the world. I felt my grip on reality begin to slip as the darkness closed in like a suffocating, crushing shroud, threatening to consume me whole. And yet I pressed on, driven by a morbid, fascinated curiosity, a burning need to uncover the truth, no matter the cost to my own fragile sanity. For in the world of the Cthulhu mythos, there is no escape, only an endless, downward spiral of horror and madness and terror that awaits us all. Boding settled over the campus of Brown University, like a shroud cast over the bustling town. It was there, amidst the venerable buildings and whispered secrets, that the enigmatic figure of Professor Angell had met his untimely demise. The news of his death sent shockwaves through the academic community, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and an unsettling aura of mystery. As the last wisps of autumn's warmth dissipated, the trees stood bare, their skeletal branches etched against the gray sky like a mournful pen and ink drawing. The wind, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, whispered an unsettling melody through the deserted alleys, as if warning of an impending doom. It was on one such dismal evening, as the shadows deepened and the gas lamps flickered to life, that the professor's body was discovered, crumpled on the rain-slicked pavement, his eyes frozen in a permanent stare of unutterable horror. The authorities, perplexed by the lack of any visible signs of trauma or foul play, were at a loss to explain the circumstances surrounding Angell's death. The only clue, a small, leather-bound book clutched in his hand, seemed to hold the key to unraveling the mystery, yet its cryptic contents only served to deepen the enigma. As the news of the professor's passing spread, a sense of unease settled over the town, like a malignant presence lurking just beyond the fringes of perception. It was then, in the midst of this creeping sense of dread, that the first whispers of a global cult began to surface, like a malevolent entity stirring from a deep, ancient slumber. Rumors spoke of a secretive organization, operating in the shadows, bound together by a shared devotion to forgotten, eldritch deities. These whispered tales, at first dismissed as the fantastical ravings of a fevered imagination, soon gained traction, as a disturbing pattern of similarities emerged, linking the professor's death to a series of bizarre, seemingly unrelated incidents scattered across the globe. From the mist-shrouded alleys of London to the sun-baked streets of New Orleans, a trail of cryptic symbols, ancient artifacts, and unexplained occurrences hinted at the existence of a vast, interconnected web of cultists, working in concert to bring about a catastrophic, world-altering event. The very thought sent shivers down the spine, as the mind recoiled in horror at the prospect of such a monstrous, globe-spanning conspiracy. As the darkness deepened, and the shadows cast by the flickering gas lamps grew longer and more sinister, the silence was punctuated by the distant, mournful tolling of a church bell, its melancholy voice echoing through the deserted streets like a funeral dirge. It was as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel, thread by thread, revealing a glimpse of the abyssal horrors that lurked beyond the veil of sanity. In this eerie, crepuscular world, where the boundaries between reality and madness seemed to blur, the professor's death became a catalyst, setting in motion a chain of events that would draw the unwary into a vortex of terror and confusion. The mysterious, leather-bound book, now the focal point of a desperate quest for knowledge, seemed to hold the key to unlocking the secrets of the cult and the eldritch, malevolent forces they worshipped. As the night wore on and the wind howled through the empty streets like a chorus of restless spirits, the shadows appeared to coalesce, taking on a life of their own, like dark, sentient entities stirring from a deep, ancient slumber. It was then, in the midst of this palpable, creeping sense of dread, that the true horror of the situation began to dawn, like a cold, grim light breaking over a desolate, nightmarish landscape. The death of Professor Angell was merely the beginning, a single, ominous note in a grand, macabre symphony, orchestrated by forces beyond human comprehension, and destined to unleash a maelstrom of unutterable terror upon the world. In the dimly lit recesses of forgotten lore, there existed a whispered tale of an ancient deity, a monstrous god known as Cthulhu, said to slumber fitfully in a state of hibernation, awaiting the celestial alignment that would signal his triumphant return to reclaim the world. It was a notion that seemed to defy the rational mind, a concept so fantastical, so bereft of substance, that it was all too easily dismissed as the fanciful ramblings of a diseased imagination. And yet, as I delved deeper into the mystery, I began to uncover hints of a darker truth, a truth that spoke of a twisted cult, bound together by their devotion to this malevolent entity. The Cult of Cthulhu, a cabal of fanatics, driven by a maddening desire to usher in the return of their monstrous deity, to bring about a catastrophic reckoning that would reshape the world in his image. Their twisted beliefs, a noxious amalgam of ancient myth and dark superstition, spoke of the Old Ones, a pantheon of eldritch beings who had ruled the earth in a bygone era, their dominion a reign of unbridled terror and chaos. These were the gods of a bygone age, forgotten deities whose malevolent influence still lingered, a malignant presence that seeped into the fabric of reality like a chill wind. As I walked the streets of New York, the steel and concrete canyons seemed to loom over me, casting long, ominous shadows that stretched and twisted in the flickering light of the street lamps. The city, a melting pot of cultures and creeds, was home to a dizzying array of faiths and philosophies, each one a unique thread in the rich tapestry of human experience. And yet, amidst this kaleidoscopic backdrop, I sensed a discordant note, a jarring presence that seemed to reverberate through the very air itself. It was as if the city, with all its mundane concerns and petty squabbles, was merely a facade, a thin veneer that concealed a far more sinister reality. I had been searching for weeks, scouring the city's hidden corners, talking to those who dwelled on the fringes of society, the outcasts and the misfits, who seemed to be drawn to the darkness like moths to a flame. And it was on one such occasion, in a crumbling, run-down tenement, in the depths of the city's most impoverished district, that I stumbled upon the first tangible evidence of the cult's existence. A tattered, yellowed pamphlet, adorned with strange, arcane symbols, and filled with the rantings of a madman, spoke of the impending return of the great Old Ones and the glorious chaos that would ensue. The language was florid, overwrought, and shot through with a lunatic fervor, and yet, as I read the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this, something that spoke to a deeper, more primal fear. The pamphlet, it seemed, was merely a recruiting tool, a beacon, calling out to those who were already attuned to the dark frequency, a siren's song, luring the unwary into the abyss. And as I looked around the squalid, cramped room, I realized that I was not alone, that unblinking eyes, hidden in the shadows, were watching me, waiting to see if I would take the bait. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the shadows seemed to writhe and twist, like living things. I felt a creeping sense of dread as I realized that I had stumbled into a realm where the boundaries between reality and madness were blurred, where the horrors that lurked in the recesses of the human psyche were given free rein to roam. The Cult of Cthulhu, it seemed, was not just a figment of a diseased imagination, but a living, breathing entity, a monstrous, hydra-headed beast that was slowly, inexorably spreading its dark influence across the face of the earth. As I left the tenement, the city seemed to stretch out before me like a twisted, nightmarish landscape, a realm of dark wonder, where the rational and the irrational coexisted in an uneasy symbiosis. The cult, it seemed, was merely a symptom, a manifestation of a far deeper, more insidious malaise, a sickness that had infected the very fabric of reality itself. And I, a mere mortal, had stumbled into this abyss with no safety net to catch my fall, no guiding light to illuminate the darkness. The only constant, it seemed, was the creeping sense of dread that had taken up residence in my mind, a cold, dead weight that threatened to consume me whole. The old ones, those ancient, eldritch beings who had ruled the earth in a bygone era, still lingered, their presence a malignant, unseen force that seeped into the world like a chill wind. Their return, it seemed, was not just a possibility, but a certainty, a catastrophic event that would reshape the world in their image. And the cult, that twisted, fanatical cabal, was merely the vanguard, the advance guard of a far larger, more complex and more sinister movement. A movement that threatened to engulf us all in a tidal wave of madness and chaos and destruction. As I walked, the city seemed to grow darker, the shadows deepening like wounds that would never heal. The cult, it seemed, was not just a cult, but a doorway, a portal to a realm of unutterable horrors, a realm where the laws of reality were twisted and distorted and broken. And I, a mere mortal, had stumbled into this doorway with no way out, no escape from the abyss that yawned before me like an open mouth, waiting to consume me whole. The darkness, it seemed, was closing in, the shadows coalescing into a living, breathing entity that would soon engulf me and the world in an eternal, nightmarish embrace. In the depths of New Orleans, where the Mississippi River stretches like a serpent through the heart of the city, a sense of foreboding settled over the streets like a shroud. It was here, in this most singular of American cities, that Inspector John Legrasse, a man of unyielding determination and unshakable conviction, delved into the very depths of horror. The year was 1907, and the world was still reeling from the aftermath of a most singular and inexplicable event, one that would forever alter the course of human understanding. As Legrasse navigated the narrow, winding streets of the French Quarter, the air thick with the scent of decay and corruption, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The city, with its crumbling architecture and faded grandeur, seemed to whisper secrets in his ear, secrets that only the most attuned of listeners might discern. It was as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel, thread by thread, revealing glimpses of a realm that lay beyond the veil of sanity. Legrasse's investigation had begun with a series of bizarre and gruesome discoveries, each one more inexplicable than the last. Human remains, mutilated beyond recognition, had been found scattered throughout the city, bearing strange symbols and markings that seemed to defy explanation. The locals, a melting pot of cultures and creeds, were tight-lipped and fearful, as if they knew more than they were letting on. It was as if a dark and malevolent force had taken hold of the city, spreading its influence like a stain across the fabric of reality. As he delved deeper into the mystery, Legrasse found himself drawn into a world of dark and foreboding ritual, a world where the boundaries between reality and madness were blurred beyond recognition. He had heard whispers of a cult, a group of robed and hooded figures who gathered in secret, their eyes aglow with an otherworldly fervor. They were said to worship ancient, forgotten deities, beings of unspeakable horror and malevolence, who slumbered fitfully in the depths of the ocean, waiting for the stars to align in propitious conjunction. The inspector's search led him to a decrepit, abandoned church on the outskirts of the city, a place where the shadows seemed to writhe and twist like living things. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something sweet and decaying, like the perfume of a corpse. As he approached the entrance, a sense of creeping dread settled over him, as if he was being watched by unseen eyes, eyes that bored into his very soul. Within the church, Legrasse discovered a scene of unutterable horror, a tableau of twisted, nightmarish ritual. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, etched into the plaster in a language that seemed to defy human comprehension. The air was thick with the scent of blood and sacrifice, and the inspector could feel the weight of the cult's dark and malevolent presence, a presence that seemed to sear itself into his very being. At the center of the ritual, Legrasse found a twisted, cyclopean statue, its surface etched with the same symbols he had seen on the walls. The statue seemed to loom over him, its presence both captivating and repellent, like a snake mesmerizing its prey. As he gazed upon the statue, the inspector felt a creeping sense of dread, as if he was being drawn into a realm beyond the bounds of sanity, a realm where the laws of reality no longer applied. The cult, it seemed, was dedicated to the worship of Cthulhu, a monstrous, tentacled deity who slumbered fitfully in the depths of the ocean, waiting for the stars to align in propitious conjunction. They believed that when the time was right, Cthulhu would rise again, unleashing a horror beyond human comprehension upon the world. The inspector knew that he had to stop them, to prevent the cult from unleashing a terror that would consume the world. But as he gazed upon the statue, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already too late, that the wheels of fate were already in motion, and that the horror that was to come was inevitable. As he departed the church, the inspector couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding, a sense that the world was on the brink of a great and terrible change. The cult, with their twisted rituals and forbidden knowledge, seemed to be merely a symptom of a far greater disease, a disease that threatened to consume the world. Legrasse knew that he had to continue his investigation, to follow the trail of clues, no matter where they might lead. But as he walked away from the church, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained upon him, waiting for him to make his next move. The darkness seemed to be closing in around him, and the inspector knew that he was running out of time. In the dimly lit recesses of my mind, a maelstrom of unholy terrors began to unfold, like a dark tapestry woven from the very fabric of my deepest fears. The dreams that beset me were a labyrinthine odyssey, a twisted journey through realms both familiar and yet utterly alien. I found myself wandering, lost and forlorn, through a desolate landscape of cyclopean ruins, where crumbling monoliths pierced the sky like shattered bones. The air was heavy with an otherworldly scent, a noxious miasma that clung to my skin like a damp, cold shroud. As I stumbled through this eerie terrain, the shadows seemed to coalesce into twisted, grotesque forms that capered and danced around me, their eyes aglow with an eldritch light that seemed to burn with an inner fire. I heard the faint, maddening whisper of a language that defied human comprehension, a cacophony of syllables that grated against my eardrums like the scraping of rusty gates. The words themselves were indistinguishable, yet the malevolent intent behind them was unmistakable, a palpable force that seemed to sear my very soul. I awoke, drenched in sweat, my heart racing with a frantic urgency, as if I had narrowly escaped some unspeakable horror that lurked just beyond the threshold of my waking consciousness. The dreams, however, refused to relinquish their hold on me, lingering in my mind like a malignant specter, their dark, twisted imagery seared into my brain like a branding iron. I became increasingly convinced that these visions were not merely the product of a fevered imagination, but rather a twisted form of communication, a cryptic message from some malignant entity that sought to convey a terrible, forbidden knowledge. It was then that I chanced upon the statue, a grotesque, green-painted figurine with bulging, bulbous eyes that seemed to stare into my very soul. The thing was hideous, a twisted, non-Euclidean abomination that seemed to defy the laws of nature, its very presence a blasphemy against the natural order. I felt an overwhelming sense of revulsion, as if I had stumbled upon some ancient, forbidden relic, a monstrous artifact that had been hidden away for centuries, waiting for some unfortunate soul to uncover it. As I turned the statue over in my hands, I noticed a series of strange, cryptic symbols etched into its base, a language that seemed to dance across the surface of the figurine like a serpent slithering through the grass. The markings were identical to those I had discovered in the notes of the late Professor Angell, a mysterious code that seemed to hold the key to unlocking the secrets of the cult. I became obsessed with deciphering the meaning behind these symbols, poring over the notes, searching for any clue that might lead me to a deeper understanding of the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the surface. The more I delved into the mystery, the more I became convinced that I was on the cusp of a terrible, earth-shattering discovery, a revelation that would shatter the fragile, complacent world I had once known. The dreams, the statue, the cryptic messages, all seemed to be connected, threads in a vast, twisted tapestry that was slowly, inexorably, beginning to unravel. I felt myself being drawn into a vortex of madness, a maelstrom of terror that threatened to consume me whole. And yet, I could not help but feel an unholy fascination, a morbid curiosity that drove me to pursue the truth, no matter the cost to my sanity or my soul. As the days passed, the dreams grew more intense, more vivid, and I began to experience strange, unsettling visions, glimpses of a world that lay beyond the veil of reality. I saw towering, cyclopean cities, their walls covered in strange, glowing symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. I saw twisted, humanoid creatures, their bodies distorted, elongated, as if they had been born from some nightmare realm. And I saw the old ones, ancient, malevolent deities who slumbered, waiting for the stars to align, waiting for the time when they would once again reclaim their dominance over a world that had forgotten the horrors that lurked in the shadows. The discovery of the statue, the deciphering of the cryptic messages, had unlocked a door in my mind, a door that led to a realm of unutterable terrors, a realm that I had never suspected existed. I was no longer sure what was real, what was a dream, and what was a product of my own fevered imagination. The boundaries between reality and madness had grown blurred, and I was lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty, unsure of what lay ahead, or what horrors awaited me in the darkness that lurked beyond the edge of perception. In the dimly lit recesses of forgotten libraries, where the scent of aged parchment and decay wafted through the air, I stumbled upon a tattered tome bound in a strange, scaly material that seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering candlelight. The cover was adorned with cryptic symbols that danced across its surface like living serpents, and the title, De Vermis Mysteriis, was etched in a language that seemed to defy the laws of mortal tongues. As I delicately opened the book, a musty smell wafted out, carrying with it the whispers of the damned. The words within spoke of a cult that spanned the globe, a twisted network of initiates bound together by a shared devotion to the great old ones, and the monstrous, green, scaly creature known only as Cthulhu. From the mist-shrouded mountains of Tibet to the crumbling temples of Angkor Wat, the cult's influence seeped like a dark, insidious stain, corrupting all it touched. Their ultimate goal, a catastrophic event of unutterable horror, was said to bring about a new era of darkness and terror, in which the old ones would reclaim their dominance over a shattered, supplicant humanity. As I delved deeper into the mysteries of the cult, I discovered that their reach extended far beyond the confines of dusty, forgotten tomes. In the sleepy, rural towns of the American Midwest, where the cornfields stretched out like a sea of gold, I found whispers of strange, pagan rituals performed under the light of the full moon. The locals spoke in hushed tones of eerie, green glowing lights that danced across the skies, and the unearthly, piping whistles that echoed through the night, summoning forth some ancient, malevolent power from the depths of the abyss. In the teeming, tropical cities of the Far East, where the sounds of the street vendors and the smells of exotic spices filled the air, I found evidence of the cult's presence in the form of mysterious, intricately carved stones, adorned with the same twisted symbols that adorned the cover of the De Vermis Mysteriis. These stones, it seemed, were the focal points of dark, occult rituals, in which the initiates of the cult summoned forth eldritch, otherworldly powers to do their bidding. The more I learned, the more I realized that the cult's plans were far more complex and sinister than I could have ever imagined. They were not merely content to spread their dark, malevolent influence across the globe, but sought to bring about a catastrophic event, a cataclysm of unutterable horror that would shatter the very fabric of reality. The stars, it seemed, were aligning in a peculiar, an ominous pattern, and the cult believed that this celestial convergence heralded the imminent return of the great old ones, who would bring with them an era of unending, eldritch terror. As I pored over the ancient, forbidden texts, I began to experience strange and terrifying visions, as if the very fabric of my sanity was beginning to unravel. I saw glimpses of a world in chaos, where the skies were filled with twisted, cyclopean cities, and the oceans churned with an otherworldly, green, slimy tide. I saw the twisted, grotesque forms of the old ones, their bulging, pulsing bodies writhing like living things, as they reclaimed their dominance over a shattered, supplicant humanity. And yet, despite the overwhelming sense of dread that threatened to consume me, I felt an insatiable, morbid fascination with the cult and their twisted, eldritch plans. I was drawn, moth-like, to the flame of madness that burned at the heart of their dark, malevolent rituals, and I knew that I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost to my own fragile sanity. The cult's global reach was a labyrinthine, complex web of dark, occult influences that seemed to stretch on forever, with no discernible beginning or end. It was a maze of twisted, nightmarish corridors, filled with unseen eldritch terrors, and I knew that I had to navigate its treacherous, winding paths if I was to uncover the secrets that lay at the heart of the cult's sinister, malevolent plans. And so, with a sense of foreboding and creeping existential dread, I steeled myself for the journey ahead, knowing that I would have to confront the very depths of madness and terror in order to uncover the truth about the cult and their catastrophic eldritch plans. Deep within the dimly lit Cyclopean city, where the moon cast an eerie glow over the twisted non-Euclidean architecture, I found myself standing at the threshold of an ancient, forgotten temple. The air was heavy with the stench of decay and corruption, and the silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the faint, maddening piping of unseen, otherworldly flutes. As I stepped across the threshold, the massive granite door creaked shut behind me, enveloping me in an inky, impenetrable darkness. The darkness was absolute, a living, breathing entity that wrapped itself around me like a shroud, making my skin crawl with an unspeakable, creeping horror. I stumbled forward, my hands outstretched in front of me, desperately trying to find some semblance of orientation in the void. The floor beneath my feet was slick with dampness, and the walls seemed to press in on me, their rough, stone surfaces exhaling a chill, damp breath that sent shivers coursing down my spine. As I moved deeper into the temple, the piping of the flutes grew louder, more insistent, weaving a hypnotic, disorienting spell that threatened to consume my very sanity. I could feel my grip on reality beginning to slip, my perceptions blurring, as the eldritch, piping melody seemed to awaken some deep, primal fear within me. The sound was like nothing I had ever heard before, a maddening, cacophonous blend of wailing, unearthly voices, and the screeching, inhuman cries of some unseen, malevolent entity. Suddenly, the darkness was pierced by a faint, flickering glow as a series of torches, mounted on the walls, burst into flame, casting eerie, dancing shadows across the stone floor. The light was faint, but it was enough to reveal the twisted, grotesque forms of the cultists, their faces contorted into inhuman, mask-like visages. As they gathered around me, their eyes blazing with an unholy, fanatical fervor. At the center of the gathering, I saw the figure of the cult leader, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly energy as he raised his hands to the heavens and began to chant in a voice that was both familiar and yet utterly alien. The words were indistinguishable, but the tone was unmistakable, a low, pulsing, rhythmic drone that seemed to vibrate through every cell of my body, awakening a deep, atavistic fear that threatened to consume me whole. As the cult leader's chant grew louder, more intense, the piping of the flutes reached a fever pitch, and the torches on the walls seemed to burn with an increased, frenzied energy, casting an eerie, hellish glow across the scene. The air was electric with anticipation as the cultists began to sway, their bodies moving in a slow, hypnotic rhythm as they summoned forth some ancient, malevolent power from the depths of the abyss. I knew in that moment that I was face to face with the ultimate horror, the dark, malevolent deity known only as Cthulhu, the great old one who lay dreaming, waiting for the stars to align and the gates of sanity to be flung open, so that it might reclaim its rightful place as the master of a shattered, nightmarish world. The thought was too terrible to contemplate, and yet I knew that I had to act to prevent the catastrophe that loomed before us all. With a surge of adrenaline, I launched myself at the cult leader, determined to stop the ritual and shatter the spell that held the cultists in thrall. But as I moved, I felt a strange, creeping sense of dread, as if I was being pulled into a living nightmare from which there was no escape. The cultists seemed to close in around me, their faces twisted into grotesque, inhuman visages as they reached out to claim me, to drag me down into the abyss, and sacrifice me to their dark, malevolent god. In a desperate bid to escape, I fought back, my fists flying as I struggled to break free from the cultists' grasp. But they were too strong, too numerous, and I felt myself being slowly, inexorably pulled down into the depths of madness and terror. The piping of the flutes grew louder, more intense as the cultists began to chant, their voices rising to a frenzied, ear-shattering crescendo that seemed to shatter the very fabric of reality. And then, in a flash of insight, I saw it, the terrible, eldritch truth that lay at the heart of the cult's twisted, nightmarish world. I saw the dark, malevolent power that lurked beyond the veil of sanity, waiting to reclaim its rightful place as the master of a shattered, nightmarish world. I saw the cultists, not as human beings but as mere puppets, manipulated by some ancient, malevolent force that used them to bring about a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. In that moment, I knew that I had to make a choice to succumb to the madness and terror that surrounded me, or to find a way to escape, to shatter the spell and prevent the catastrophe. With a surge of determination, I fought back, my mind racing, as I desperately sought a way to defeat the cult and banish the dark, malevolent power back to the depths of the abyss. The outcome was far from certain, as I stumbled forward into the heart of the nightmare, determined to confront the ultimate horror and emerge victorious or die trying. As I emerged from the dimly lit Cyclopean chamber, the warm, golden sunlight that bathed the streets of New York seemed a cruel mockery, a stark contrast to the eldritch horrors that lurked in the shadows. The memories of the cult's twisted rituals, the grotesque, green, scaly flesh of the creature, and the haunting, otherworldly piping that seemed to sear itself into my very soul, all swirled together in a maelstrom of madness that threatened to consume me whole. I stumbled through the city streets, a stranger in a strange land, as the familiar skyscrapers and bustling crowds seemed to loom over me like specters, their faces twisted into grotesque, inhuman grins. The world, once a rational, understandable place, had been turned upside down, revealing a twisted, nightmarish realm that lurked just beneath the surface of reality. I felt like a man who had stumbled into a living nightmare, with no escape from the clutches of the monstrous, malevolent forces that lurked in the darkness. Every step I took, every breath I made, seemed to echo with the haunting, piping call of the creature, a call that seemed to grow louder, more insistent with every passing moment. As I walked, the city streets seemed to blur together, a kaleidoscope of sounds, sights, and smells that assaulted my senses, leaving me reeling, disoriented. The sounds of car horns, chatter, and wailing sirens all blended together into a cacophony of chaos, a symphony of madness that seemed to match the turmoil that raged within my mind. I felt like a small, insignificant, fragile thing, a mere mortal, adrift in a sea of uncertainty, as the vast, unknowable cosmic forces that lurked beyond the veil of reality seemed to close in around me. And yet, even as the horrors I had witnessed seemed to overwhelm me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had merely scratched the surface of a far larger, more complex and more sinister truth. The cult, the creature, the twisted, cyclopean cities that lurked beneath the waves, all seemed to be mere threads in a far larger, more intricate tapestry, a tapestry that seemed to stretch out before me like an endless, dark, and foreboding sea. As the days passed, I found myself becoming increasingly withdrawn, isolated, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched, That unblinking, malevolent eyes were trained on me, waiting for me to let my guard down, to succumb to the madness that lurked within. I would see things out of the corner of my eye, twisted, grotesque creatures that seemed to flit at the edges of my perception, only to vanish when I turned to look. I would hear whispers in the night, faint, raspy, whispers that seemed to carry on the wind, whispers that spoke of dark, forbidden knowledge and the terrible, soul-shattering power that lurked beyond the stars. And then there were the dreams, the twisted, surreal nightmares that seemed to haunt my every waking moment. I would dream of the creature, of its twisted, green, scaly flesh, of its bulging, pulsing eyes that seemed to burn with an otherworldly, malevolent intelligence. I would dream of the cult, of their twisted, depraved rituals, of the haunting, piping call that seemed to echo through my mind, long after I had awoken. I would dream of the cities, the twisted, cyclopean metropolises that lurked beneath the waves, their towering, monolithic spires reaching up towards the sky like skeletal fingers, as if to snare the unwary and drag them down into the depths of madness and despair. As the dreams grew more intense, more vivid, I began to realize that I was losing my grip on reality, that the horrors I had witnessed were slowly, inexorably, driving me mad. I would find myself wandering the streets, unsure of where I was, or how I had gotten there, with no memory of the events that had transpired since I had last been aware. I would stumble upon strange, cryptic symbols etched into the walls, symbols that seemed to pulse with a malevolent, otherworldly energy, as if they were gateways to realms beyond our own. And yet, even as the madness closed in around me, I couldn't help but feel a twisted, perverse fascination with the horrors that lurked beyond the veil of reality. I would pore over the ancient, forbidden tomes that I had uncovered, devouring the dark, forbidden knowledge that they contained, as if I was driven by a morbid curiosity, a desire to understand the twisted, eldritch forces that lurked beyond the stars. As the darkness deepened, I began to realize that I was not alone in my quest for knowledge, that there were others out there, others who shared my fascination with the horrors that lurked beyond the veil of reality. I would receive strange, cryptic letters, letters that spoke of forbidden knowledge and the terrible, soul-shattering power that lurked beyond the stars. I would meet with strangers, strangers who seemed to know more than they were letting on, strangers who would whisper hints of dark, forbidden secrets, and the terrible, eldritch forces that lurked beyond the veil of reality. And so, I continued my journey, a journey into the heart of madness, a journey that would take me to the very limits of human endurance and beyond. I would delve deeper into the mysteries of the Cthulhu mythos, uncovering secrets that were meant to remain hidden, and confronting horrors that would haunt my every waking moment. The Call of Cthulhu, the haunting, piping call that had first drawn me into this twisted, nightmarish world, seemed to grow louder, more insistent with every passing moment. A call that I could not resist, a call that would ultimately lead me to the very brink of madness and beyond.